The overhead bins rattled, the kind of turbulence that gets your pulse racing a bit if you're not used to flying. But trust me, the real storm wasn't in the clouds outside that plane. It was in row 27, right back there in economy, crammed up against the window like everyone else who couldn't afford to pick their seats. There was this guy, just another tired dad, wearing a faded hoodie and boots that had clearly seen better days, holding his little girl close. She was maybe 7, blonde curls all tangled up, clutching this stuffed rabbit with ears worn thin. You know the look, a kid's favorite toy, dragged everywhere and loved half to death. People around them. Well, you could feel the judgment in the air, sharp, ecstatic. Some were snickering quietly, a few rolling their eyes. And there was this woman in pearls up front, talking just loud enough so everyone would hear her little comments about people who probably spent their last dime just to get on a flight like this. Her husband laughed, and you could almost see the word pathetic written on their faces. Daniel, the dad, heard every word, I guarantee it. His jaw clenched, knuckles white on the armrest. But he just kept singing softly to his daughter, trying to keep her calm. She was scared. You could see it. Every time the plane jolted, she'd bury her face against his chest and whisper, Daddy, I'm scared. And he'd just smile, tuck that raggedy old rabbit under her chin, and say, Remember, you're brave like the rabbit, Em. You know, the way dads do, holding it together even when you know inside. Their nerves are shot too. Now, let me back up a sec, because you need to understand. To everyone else, Daniel looked like nobody. Just a broke single dad who probably didn't belong in the same sky as them. But here's where things turn. About 10 minutes after the turbulence started, the intercom comes on, and there's something in the captain's voice that isn't routine. He says, Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a minor systems issue. Please remain calm. Crew, standard protocol. And the lights flicker. You ever notice how people who spend the whole flight judging you suddenly get real quiet when things go wrong? That's what happened. Every head snapped up, people clinging to their seats. And then it happened. A flight attendant comes hustling down the aisle, stops right next to Daniel, and for a split second, she just stares at him like she's seeing a ghost. Suddenly, her whole vibe shifts. She stands up straight, gives this little nod, and says, Sir, we may need your guidance. The word sir landed like a bomb. You could almost hear the pearls clattering as that woman's head jerked around. The folks who'd been whispering stopped mid-sentence. Phones dropped, Daniel's eyes sharpened, all that calmness suddenly taking on a different energy. Show me what's happening, he said. And just like that, the plane got so quiet you could hear the overhead fan humming. The attendant's voice cracked. Sir, the captain requested you at the front. Protocol says if you're on board, she trailed off, realizing she'd said too much already. The tension in the cabin was a living thing. Daniel kissed his daughter's forehead, pressed the rabbit into her hands. Stay brave, Em, he said, and then he stood up, moving down the aisle with every eye following him. This man who looked invisible minutes ago, suddenly, the crew was treating him like the president. Another attendant nodded at him, murmuring, Sir, welcome aboard. And people started to whisper, Who is he? At the cockpit, the captain looked up, relief all over his face. Major Hayes, he said under his breath, and you'd have thought someone let a snake loose in the cabin, the way people gasped. Didn't know you were flying today. For a moment, Daniel just looked tired, but the old reflexes kicked in. He asked for a situation report. Turns out an electrical fault had taken out a navigation backup. Not a crash risk, but enough to shake up the crew, and if panic spread, you know how fast things can spiral at 30,000 feet, the captain said. Having you here changes things. Daniel nodded. He'd spent 15 years in the Air Force, handling worse than this with lives on the line. I'll calm the passengers, but I want updates every 5 minutes. Understood. The captain didn't hesitate. Yes, sir. Daniel walked back, and I swear, you could feel the respect building, washing away the earlier mockery like rain on chalk. People who'd sneered dropped their eyes. The kid who'd been recording tried to hide his phone. Daniel stopped halfway down the aisle, looked everyone in the eye, and said, Ladies and gentlemen, everything's under control. The crew is following protocol. I'm here to make sure you're safe. So hold on to your loved ones, and let's keep calm. Panicking doesn't help anyone. His voice was steady as bedrock. No one argued. Back at his seat, Emily was waiting, wide-eyed. "Are we okay?" she whispered. Daniel smiled, softer now, and said, "We're more than okay, sweetheart." But he didn't just comfort her. He turned it into a lesson in kindness. "See that little boy?" He nodded toward a kid her age, sobbing into a game console. "Why don't you share Brave Rabbit with him for a bit?" Emily hesitated. That rabbit was her world. But she squared her little shoulders, walked over, and gently set it in the boy's lap. His tears slowed. His mom mouthed, "Thank you." And that tiny act of kindness spread, turning shame into something like hope. People started murmuring apologies. The air changed. One guy, the same one who'd been filming, cleared his throat and said, "Sorry, sir." For earlier, Daniel just nodded, not smug, not angry, just focused. The rest of the flight was tense, but every time the plane jolted, people looked to Daniel. He didn't flinch, so neither did they. The attendant knelt by his seat, whispering, "System stable, sir. Captain thanks you for being here." Daniel nodded, looking down at Emily, who was watching her rabbit, now held tightly by a boy who wasn't crying anymore. By the time the captain announced they were preparing for descent, something fundamental had shifted. Fear had melted, replaced by a grudging respect. The woman in pearls even turned to Daniel, voice low, "I judged you. I was wrong." He replied, "Everyone belongs here. Remember that." The words hung in the air, heavy as gospel. As the wheels touched down, something cinematic happened. The flight attendants unbuckled, breaking protocol, walked straight to row 27, stood at attention, and, as if on cue, nodded to Daniel. "Thank you, sir." The cabin went dead silent. A couple folks clapped, but it wasn't the whooping applause of a sports game. It was reverent. Daniel didn't stand or soak it up. He hugged Emily, nodded to the crew. The captain's voice came through. "For those wondering, Major Hayes served this country for over 15 years. Many of the protocols we follow today were shaped by men like him. His presence today was no accident. It was providence." That word echoed, people staring at the quiet dad in a hoodie as if seeing him for the first time. When the plane finally stopped at the gate, no one jumped up to grab their bags. They waited. Some, like the guy in the designer's suit, the woman in pearls, paused to apologize, voice shaky with real regret. "I judged you and I was wrong. Thank you." Daniel met their eyes. "Be better to the next person who looks like me." That'll mean more than an apology. No lectures. Just the truth. He bent down, whispered to Emily, "See? Brave Rabbit helped more than just you today." She grinned, her missing front tooth making her look fierce. Together, they walked into the terminal, just a dad and his little girl again. Ordinary, at least to strangers. But to every soul on that plane, they'd never be just ordinary again. And if you ask me, that's the lesson. Kindness and strength, real strength, doesn't wear a uniform or need a title. It's how you carry yourself when nobody expects much from you. How you show up for the people who need you most, even when nobody's watching. On that flight, Daniel Hayes reminded everyone of that. But to Emily, he was never Major Hayes. He was just Dad. And in the end, that's the only title that ever really mattered. Now, I want to know, what do you think? Is respect something you earn, or something everyone deserves from the start? Drop your thoughts below. Would you have seen Daniel differently before knowing his story? Let's talk about justice, kindness, and those snap judgments we all make. I'll be reading the comments, so don't hold back. This is where the real conversation starts.